welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to dive into this with you today. We're going to unpack a massive, impending climate event. And look, we're not just talking about your standard weather forecasts here. We're tracking a profound global ripple effect, one that's going to touch our oceans, our ecosystems, and human societies across the board. We're digging into the 2026-2027 El Niño event, what the data is literally screaming at us right now, and exactly why this matters to you.
Greater than 90%. Let that sink in for a second. Based on the latest data from August 2026, there is a staggering, greater than 90% chance of a very strong El Niño event hitting this fall and winter. This isn't just a mere possibility or some tentative model projection. No, this is a highly probable, impending reality that is already setting global systems into motion as we speak.
To ground this in hard science, listen to this direct quote from the official advisory from the NOAA Climate Prediction Center. El Niño is strengthening, with a greater than 90% chance of a very strong event during the Northern Hemisphere fall and winter 2026-27. You know, when the world's preeminent climate scientists put out an alert with that level of certainty, we absolutely need to pay close attention to what's brewing beneath the surface.
Okay, let's dive right into this data because the underlying metrics are just astounding. Right now, there's a 69% chance that this is going to be a historic event. We're talking about potentially exceeding the strength of all El Niño events dating back to 1950, reaching or even surpassing a 2.5 degrees Celsius increase. Now, a 2.5 degree increase is historic on its own, but what's truly mind-blowing is what's happening deep down. Subsurface temperature anomalies have hit a massive plus 10 degrees Celsius. That giant pool of underwater heat, that's the engine driving this whole unprecedented climate shift.
Section 1. The hurricane seesaw, shifting winds across the oceans.
So, what does this all mean? Where does that massive pool of oceanic heat actually go? Well, it completely alters global atmospheric circulation. You can think of El Niño as a giant seesaw for hurricanes. On the Pacific side, the warming ocean actually causes weaker vertical wind shear, and without those strong upper-level winds to tear developing storms apart, hurricane activity in the Pacific just gets fueled and strengthens. But over in the Atlantic basin, the exact opposite happens. El Niño creates stronger vertical wind shear over there. These strong winds act almost like a buzzsaw in the atmosphere, ripping apart developing storms and effectively suppressing Atlantic hurricane activity. It's crazy, right? One ocean's quiet season is literally another ocean's perfect storm.
Section 2. Ecosystems in Peril, the Galapagos Epicenter.
Now, we all know what an SSTA is, a sea surface temperature anomaly, but the scale here is what truly matters. During a typical El Niño, we see anomalies of anywhere from 2 to 6 degrees Celsius. To us up here on land, a 2-degree difference in the air just means, deciding whether to grab a light jacket before leaving the house. But in the ocean, it fundamentally alters the entire chemistry and survivability of the water. And this brilliantly illustrates a brutal ecological domino effect. It starts when that SSTA hits just plus 2 degrees Celsius. That slight warming causes chlorophyll concentrations to completely plummet below 0.12 milligrams per cubic meter. And because chlorophyll is our primary indicator for phytoplankton, when it drops, the whole phytoplankton base collapses. Since they're the microscopic foundation of the entire marine food web, the dominoes just keep falling, all the way up to the top, leaving apex marine predators facing actual starvation. Basically, a mere 2-degree shift starves the entire ecosystem from the bottom up.
Section 3. The human toll, socioeconomic shocks in Asia.
Now, what's really interesting about this data is how this wave creates immense interconnected vulnerabilities the moment it hits human societies. Looking at agriculture, 47.3% of studies are reporting significant yield drops. We're talking prolonged droughts, devastating floods, and increased pest outbreaks driven by this shifting climate. Moving down to water resources, 40.6% face critical scarcity. That means depleted groundwater right alongside vital infrastructure being damaged by those very same floods. And in public health, nearly 30% highlight a surge in vector-borne disease risks. Malaria and dengue outbreaks are expanding because these temperature shifts create new extended breeding seasons for mosquitoes.
And it doesn't stop there. The data points out that 35.2% of studies note severe supply chain disruptions and price inflation specifically triggered by these ENSO disturbances. Think about it. When localized agricultural yields plummet and water resources dry up, it ripples outward into broader economic instability. A drought in a major Asian agricultural hub suddenly translates to higher prices and missing goods on your local grocery store shelves globally. It turns out we are all downstream of the Pacific Ocean.
Section 4. Adapting to the future, building the shield. When we look at the structural relationship between climate change impacts, resources, and our socioeconomic development, it clearly demands dual actions: mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation is treating the root cause, lowering greenhouse gas emissions. But simultaneously, adaptation activities are what directly defend our socioeconomic path against the unavoidable climate impacts that are already in motion right now. We can't just cross our fingers and rely entirely on lowering emissions for tomorrow. We have to actively adapt to the extreme weather events, like this impending El Niño, that are literally standing on our doorstep today.
Let's move on and see how this builds into 3 actionable levels of adaptation that farmers and governments must employ right now. Level 1 is incremental. These are your immediate adjustments, stuff like setting up drip irrigation to save water, altering planting schedules, or using biological pest control. Then, level 2 is systemic. This requires heavier investment. We're looking at shifting entirely to climate-resilient crops, or maybe implementing AI decision support systems to manage scarce water resources. Finally, level 3 is transformational. This is a massive, fundamental shift in how we live. We're talking about entire communities having to diversify their economies, transitioning to brand new livelihoods, or, in the most extreme cases, executing planned relocations away from high-risk flood zones.
And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway from all this data. The ripple effect is already well underway beneath the surface of the Pacific. We have the data, we understand the meteorological seesaw, we see the ecological dominoes falling, and we know our exact socioeconomic vulnerabilities. So, the final question I want to leave you with is this. As the historic 2026 El Niño ripple effect rapidly approaches, is our global society truly ready to do the hard work to adapt? Or are we just waiting for the wave to hit? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and as always, keep engaging with the data.